On a stormy night along a quiet road, a humble single-dad janitor stopped to help a drenched soldier struggling alone with a flat tire. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that this lost young woman carried a secret, powerful enough to shatter or save his entire life. Because she wasn't just any soldier. She was the Navy Admiral's daughter, and she held his fate in her hands. This is a story of kindness in the darkest hour, of courage against corruption, and of how a single act of compassion can rewrite the destiny of 3 hearts forever. Before we begin, if stories of quiet heroes hope family and second chances speak to your heart, we invite you to join our channel. Your support helps us bring more meaningful stories to life. Now, let's begin the journey. The rain had started, as a whisper, light scattered drops tapping against the windshield. But by the time Michael Hale turned his pickup onto Maple Road, the storm had swallowed the entire sky. Sheets of cold water hammered down, blurring the world into gray streaks. The wipers fought desperately, slashing left and right, never quite catching up. In the back seat, little Kara hummed to herself, her red umbrella resting on her knees and her teddy bear tucked under one arm. 7 years old, freckles bright eyes, she carried an unshakable optimism that made even the darkest days feel a little warmer. "Daddy, is the thunder angry?" she asked, peeking up at him. "No, sweetheart," Michael said, forcing a smile despite the storm outside and the storm inside him. Just clouds bumping into each other. She accepted that without question. She always did. And Michael cherished it because innocence was something the world took fast. He slowed as the road curved. Maple Road was long quiet and bordered by pasture land, a place where storms felt bigger, heavier. But then through the blur of rain, something caught his eye. A red SUV, hazard lights blinking, and beside it, a figure kneeling at the rear tire. A woman. A soldier. Completely drenched. Michael gently pressed the brake. Kara leaned forward between the seats. "Daddy, she's getting soaked, I see her." The soldier was struggling with a lug wrench, her hand slipping her uniform plastered to her skin. Even from a distance, Michael could see the fatigue in the set of her shoulders. She looked like she'd been out there too long fighting a tire that wasn't going to win. Michael pulled over. Before he even had the chance to reach for the door, Kara was already scrambling with her umbrella. "I'm gonna help her, Kara, wait." But she was quick, a burst of red dress and small footsteps. Michael sighed, grabbed his jacket, and followed her out into the downpour. The rain hit him hard, soaking him instantly. His boots splashed through puddles as he hurried after his daughter. "Kara, stay close," he called, but her attention was fixed entirely on the soldier. The woman finally looked up, startled by the sudden pop of a bright red umbrella above her. Kara held it up with both hands, her face scrunched with determination. "You're getting wet," she said simply, as if announcing a scientific fact. The soldier blinked, her braid stuck to her cheek, her breaths uneven. She looked from Kara to Michael, who was slowing to a stop beside them. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady but tired. "No," Kara insisted. "Daddy said, helping is important. And you look like you need it." Michael swallowed hard. Kids had a way of telling the truth without hesitation. He crouched down, slightly eyeing the stuck lug nut. "You mind if I take a look?" The soldier hesitated, a trained instinct of caution, then nodded. "Be my guest. It's not exactly cooperating." Michael took the wrench. His hands knew the weight of metal, the feel of pressure. Years of military motor pool work had given him a touch that wasn't easy to lose. The lug nut resisted at first, mule stubborn, but Michael shifted his stance, braced himself, and gave a hard, controlled turn. Crack. It loosened. The woman stared, impressed despite herself. Michael exhaled, glancing up. It was over-tightened. "Happens when the shop uses impact tools." She wiped rain from her eyes. "Well, thank you. Really." Her voice carried a mixture of strength and exhaustion. Up close, Michael noticed the small tremble in her fingers, the shadow beneath her eyes. She'd been dealing with more than a flat tire. "What's your name?" Kara asked suddenly. The woman hesitated again, only a split second, but enough for Michael to notice. "Daisy," she said. "Just Daisy." "And I'm Kara," the little girl chirped. "Daddy's name is Michael Hale." The moment the name left Kara's lips, Daisy's expression changed, subtle but unmistakable. Her eyes widened just slightly. Her breath caught. A flash of recognition crossed her face like lightning behind the clouds. Michael didn't see judgment. He saw surprise, a deep assessing kind of surprise. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes, sorry. Just the storm," Daisy replied quickly. But she wouldn't quite look him in the eye. He didn't push. People carried their own storms. Within minutes, the spare tire was mounted. Michael tightened the bolts with practiced precision. "You're good to go," he said, stepping back. Daisy exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath the entire time. "Thank you. Really. I owe you." Michael shook his head. "No, you don't. It's just a tire." But Daisy didn't move. She looked at him. Really looked as though trying to match the face of the man kneeling in the rain with something she knew or feared. Lightning flashed in the distance. Kara tugged at Daisy's soaked sleeve. "You can come with us if you're cold." Daisy's composure cracked into a tiny laugh, a soft, gentle sound almost swallowed by the storm. "I'll be okay," she said. "But you're very sweet." She looked up one last time, her gaze lingering on Michael. "Be careful," she said quietly. "Storms get worse before they get better." Michael couldn't shake the feeling that she meant more than the weather. He watched as she stepped into her SUV, started the engine, and drove off into the rain, leaving behind a swirl of questions he didn't know how to ask. Kara slipped her hand into his. "Daddy." She was like an angel in the rain. He stared down Maple Road, the storm growing heavier, deeper, darker. "Yeah," he murmured. Maybe she was. And somewhere within that storm, Daisy Drake whispered Michael's name to herself, because fate had just collided with her in the most unexpected way. Daisy Drake sat in the passenger seat of the military shuttle, her uniform still damp from the storm, her mind running faster than the windshield wipers. The base gates glowed ahead, massive iron structures illuminated by the harsh white lights that never slept. Rain slid down the windows like restless fingers, matching the unease twisting in her chest. She should have been thinking about the flat tire, about the storm, about getting home and drying off. But all she could think of was one name. Michael Hale. The moment the little girl said it, something in Daisy had jolted an instinct, a memory, a warning. When she stepped off the shuttle and badged herself into the admin wing, the cold, fluorescent light felt sharper than usual. She made her way to the personnel office where a stack of unresolved disciplinary files waited for her, freshly reassigned from another officer who had scheduling conflicts. Her stomach tightened. She already suspected why the stack was directed to her. Her last name, Drake, had a way of opening doors others couldn't. And sometimes it quietly pushed responsibilities onto her that no one else wanted. Daisy dropped her wet beret on the desk and slid into the chair. As she reached for the first file, she froze. Right there, clipped neatly on top of the stack. Service review. Case number 7A-113, Michael Hale. Allegation. Sabotage of motor pool diagnostic equipment. Recommendation. Immediate disciplinary action. Pending review. The words hit harder than any rainstorm. She blinked, her heart kicking into a faster rhythm. "No way," she whispered. But it was him. The quiet man on Maple Road, with steady hands and calm eyes. The man who helped her without hesitation. The man whose daughter held an umbrella over her like a tiny guardian angel. That man, accused of sabotage. Daisy pulled the file closer. A thickness formed in her throat as she flipped through the pages. Something didn't feel right. It wasn't the kind of case that should have reached her desk. And the evidence? At first glance, it felt too clean, too polished, too perfect. She leaned in, scanning signature blocks, timestamps, system logs. The deeper she went, the more her brows knitted together. A maintenance log had been altered, system data overwritten, a digital signature that looked almost authentic but not quite. The shift schedule didn't align. The equipment report contradicted itself. Daisy frowned. Whoever wrote this expected her to skim it, to rubber stamp it, to accept the narrative and move on. But something about Michael Hale's eyes, calm, steady, honest, haunted her. She whispered to the empty office, "This doesn't add up." A knock tapped on her door. She straightened. "Come in." A junior enlisted woman stepped in to drop more files, but noticed the open case. Her eyes widened slightly. "Ma'am? You got that one." "That one," Daisy repeated sharply. The junior soldier hesitated. I heard Lieutenant Cole Maddox was handling that case. Everyone said it was closed and done." "I didn't think they'd pass it to you." Daisy's jaw clenched. Lieutenant Cole Maddox. She'd worked with him enough to know he was calculating, ambitious, and skilled at making problems disappear one way or another. "And why was it closed and done?" Daisy asked. "Because they said the evidence was obvious. They said Hale confessed." Daisy shook her head. "There is no confession in this file." The junior soldier swallowed. "Exactly, ma'am. It never sat right with some of us." Daisy watched her carefully, the pieces sliding into place. "Thank you, specialist." Dismissed. When the door closed, Daisy let out a slow breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Michael Hale's case wasn't just suspicious. It was constructed. Fabricated. She turned back to the file, her pulse picking up. Every page she read strengthened her resolve. The storm on Maple Road wasn't the only kind of storm she was stepping into. Michael Hale didn't look like a man who would sabotage anything. He looked like someone carrying his world quietly on his shoulders. Someone holding the line because no one else was there to do it. And that little girl, Kara, the child who held an umbrella over a stranger without being asked. Daisy closed the file softly. This wasn't just paperwork anymore. She glanced at the security camera in the corner of the room. For a moment, she hesitated. Investigating this further meant stepping outside the lines, maybe even stepping against the system. But she had seen lies before. She knew the smell of manufactured guilt. And something inside her, something her father always admired, refused to let an innocent man fall. She opened a new screen on her computer and began digging. Cross-checking timestamps, comparing digital logs, matching signatures, reconstructing file versions. It was like peeling back layers of rot. Then she found it the anomaly. A data entry tagged under Cole Maddox's credentials, supposedly at a time he was documented as being off base. Her breath caught. There it was. The crack in the wall. Why would Maddox insert himself into this? She murmured. And why frame Hale? She didn't know the answer yet, but she knew this. She couldn't walk away now. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the exit. Rain still fell outside, but softer now, a lingering drizzle. As she stepped into the night, she whispered to herself, "Michael Hale, who are you really?" And somewhere on Maple Road, a quiet man tucked his daughter into bed, unaware that a soldier he helped in the rain was about to risk her career, and possibly much more, to uncover the truth hidden behind his name. The morning after the storm, the world felt strangely still, as if Maple Road had swallowed the thunder and kept the secrets for itself. But inside, Michael Hale's small rented home life was already awake and moving, driven by the routine he clung to like a lifeline. The The smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Kara sat at the table, swinging her legs, tapping her spoon against her cereal bowl like a tiny drummer. "Daddy," she asked between bites, "do soldiers get cold?" Michael looked up from the lunch he was packing for her peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, a handwritten note like always. "Everyone gets cold," he said gently. But she looked extra cold, Kara insisted, like her heart was tired. Michael paused. The way she said it struck him simple but perceptive. Kara always saw things adults tended to miss. He forced a smile. Maybe the storm surprised her. Kara nodded, satisfied. But Michael wasn't, because the truth was he couldn't stop thinking about the soldier either. Daisy. The way she hesitated saying her name, the way she reacted when she heard his, and the look in her eyes as she drove away, half relief, half something else. Recognition, maybe. Or fear. Michael shook the thought away. He didn't have time for mysteries. Not when he had a daughter to raise, and a life to hold together thread by thread. "Come on, kiddo," he said, helping Kara with her backpack. "Let's get moving." The base. 45 a.m. Michael scanned into the motor pool warehouse, the cool scent of metal and grease instantly grounding him. Rows of vehicles, Humvees, supply trucks, maintenance rigs sat in the dim light. This place used to feel like home, before the investigation, before the whispers, before everything changed. Now, as he walked through the aisles, he could feel eyes glance at him, quickly turning away. Not hostile. Worse, uncertain. People didn't know whether to trust him. Michael pushed forward, keeping his expression steady. He knew how rumors spread on base. The slightest stain became permanent. And his case wasn't small. Sabotage wasn't a slap-on-the-wrist offense. It was career-ending, life-altering, criminal. He'd said nothing publicly. Arguing only made you look guilty. Fighting back made you a target. He kept his head down, did the work, picked up shifts no one wanted. Quiet resilience was his armor. But the weight of it was beginning to carve into him. He moved toward his workstation, a corner with an old metal toolbox, a manual diagnostic rig, and a squeaky stool. Someone had left a note on the bench. He unfolded it. "Heard there's new evidence. Good luck." "No signature." Michael swallowed the bitterness rising in his throat. Evidence. New evidence. That meant the case wasn't dying the quiet death he'd prayed for. Someone somewhere was pushing it forward. He didn't know yet that Daisy Drake was the reason. A break-room conversation. Two mechanics stood near the coffee pot, talking in low voices. They stiffened when they noticed him. "Morning," Michael said casually. They muttered back, avoiding his eyes. The younger one finally blurted out, "Did you really do it?" His co-worker elbowed him, but the question hung in the air like smoke. Michael studied the young soldier, barely 20 acne scars, fear in his eyes. "No," Michael said simply. "I didn't." The young soldier let out a shaky breath, as if relieved, but also unsure whether relief was the correct response. Michael didn't blame him. The military ran on chain of command, on paperwork, on presumed truth, and the truth on paper didn't look good. He returned to his station. His hands worked automatically, sorting tools, checking batteries, logging inventory. Mundane tasks, but they kept his mind from unraveling. Until his phone buzzed. A message from the daycare. "Kara drew a picture of you helping the soldier last night. Very sweet." Michael smiled despite himself. When he pictured that moment, Kara holding the umbrella, Daisy kneeling in the rain, something inside him softened. A moment of warmth in a world that had grown too cold, too fast. But the warmth didn't last. Because as he set his phone down, reality swept back in. He was a single father barely holding a job, under investigation for something he didn't do. One wrong move from losing everything. And standing in the storm, helping a stranger, had felt like an escape. A brief reminder of the man he used to be, before fear and suspicion followed him like shadows. The quiet battle. By noon, the thunder inside Michael's chest had grown louder than the storm outside the night before. The weight of the case pressed down on him heavy and suffocating. He needed a break. He stepped out behind the warehouse, leaning against the brick wall. The air was crisp, quiet. He closed his eyes. He didn't pray often, but today he did. Not for himself. For strength. For Kara. For the courage to keep going. A soft beep echoed from the loading dock, breaking the silence. Lieutenant Cole Maddox strode in sharp uniform, sharper smile. The kind of smile that meant nothing good. Michael stiffened. Cole nodded once. "Hale." "Sir." "Just checking on a few things," Cole said casually, though his eyes gleamed with something colder. "Your case might shift soon." Michael's jaw tensed. Shift, how Cole shrugged. Depends on what turns up. New details always appear right before things get finalized. The words carried a threat, a promise. Michael forced his breathing to stay steady. Cole stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'd keep your head down," he said. "Might make things easier." Easier for whom Michael didn't ask. He knew. Cole walked away, leaving a trail of unease behind him. Michael stood there, long after the lieutenant disappeared, gripping the edge of the wall until his knuckles whitened. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a clerical error. Someone wanted him gone. And somewhere across base, Daisy Drake was flipping through that same file, discovering the same truth. Neither of them knew it yet, but their storms were about to collide again. The fluorescent lights in the records division hummed with an indifferent steadiness, a stark contrast to Daisy Drake's pulse pounding in her ears. She sat alone at a secured desk, the room emptied for the evening. Outside, the sky still carried the heavy gray of yesterday's storm, as if the weather itself refused to settle. She pulled Michael Hale's file closer. Not as an officer, not because of her assignment, but because something inside her whispered that the man she met on Maple Road, the man kneeling in the rain with calm hands and gentle eyes, could not be the one this file described. She clicked open the digital backlogs again. Line by line, timestamp by timestamp, signature by signature. And every time she reached the same conclusion, the evidence didn't just look suspicious, it looked engineered. She highlighted an entry. 3:42 a.m., Hale accessed diagnostic console. But the key swipe logs placed Michael in the break room at that exact time. 18 cameras confirmed it. The discrepancy wasn't small. It was deliberate. She leaned back, rubbing the ache in her neck. The thought formed slowly, chillingly. Someone wanted Michael Hale to look guilty. Her mind drifted back, uninvited, to the moment Kara lifted that little red umbrella over her head. The warmth, the innocence, the way Michael smiled, as if he didn't believe he deserved kindness. A man like that. Sabotaging military equipment, impossible. The door to the records room swung open. Daisy stiffened. Lieutenant Cole Maddox entered with a crisp stride, closing the door behind him, with the kind of confidence that belonged to someone used to being obeyed. His uniform looked perfect, not a crease out of place. His smile, tight, rehearsed, never reached his eyes. "Working late, Drake?" he asked. Reviewing reassigned cases, she replied, her tone neutral. Cole walked closer than necessary, resting a hand on the top of her chair. She didn't flinch, but she wanted to. He peered at the file on her desk. Ah, the Hale case. Her jaw tensed. "You handled this originally," handled Cole repeated with a smirk. "Meaning I closed it? Or tried to?" Daisy lifted her chin. "There are inconsistencies." Cole's smile evaporated, as if she'd turned off a switch. "Inconsistencies," he echoed. She tapped the screen. "This log entry is impossible. The timestamp doesn't match the key swipes. and she slid another tablet toward him. This signature is almost identical, but the pressure pattern is off by 7%. Cole's eyebrow twitched. You're digging pretty deep, aren't you? It's my job. Cole leaned down, his voice low. Your job is to sign off and move the case forward, not to dissect every pixel. A quiet tension filled the space between them. Daisy didn't move. If the file is wrong, the outcome is wrong. Cole's fingers drummed once on the desk, a warning. Be careful, Drake. You don't know where this rabbit hole leads. Then maybe you should tell me, she said, calmly. His eyes hardened steel behind glass, but he said nothing. He straightened his uniform, turned sharply, and exited the room, leaving behind a silence that felt colder than the rain outside. Daisy exhaled shakily. If Cole Maddox had nothing to hide, he wouldn't be afraid of her questions, which meant he had everything to hide. Digging deeper. The rain began again as she walked across base toward her private quarters, her boots striking the pavement with quick, decisive steps. She replayed the encounter in her mind, the clipped answers, the forced smile, the unspoken threat. She had grown up in the shadow of her father's command. She knew warning signs well, and Cole Maddox had just issued one. Inside her apartment, she peeled off her uniform jacket and sat at her dining table, pulling out her secure tablet. If Cole didn't want her looking deeper, she needed to. Her fingers flew across the screen, accessing encrypted channels, cross-referencing personnel logs, maintenance schedules, surveillance clips, data no one expected her to connect. She discovered a trail. Cole's ID used at odd late-night hours. Reports modified minutes after his access. 2 technicians transferred suddenly after giving statements. A streak of similar sabotage conclusions that conveniently opened positions Cole later filled or influenced. A cold realization ran through her. Michael Hale wasn't the only one. He was simply the easiest one to bury. And Cole Maddox, ambitious political calculating, had everything to gain by making someone else look culpable. Her breath tightened in her throat. Michael Hale wasn't fighting a misunderstanding. He was fighting a machine. She closed the files and pressed her palms to her eyes. The weight of what she'd discovered wasn't just professional, it was personal. She couldn't stop seeing Kara's small hands holding that red umbrella standing bravely between them and the storm. And Michael, the steadiness in his voice, the humility, the exhaustion hiding behind it. A man carrying too much. A man who didn't deserve this. Daisy whispered into the quiet room. I can't let you fall, Michael. The decision crystallized inside her like lightning forging glass. She would investigate. She would gather proof. She would confront the truth no matter how high it reached. But she wasn't naive. She knew danger when it breathed down her neck. And tonight, danger had a name. Cole Maddox. Storm clouds ahead. Before turning in, she pulled out a secure recorder and spoke softly into it. Entry 1. Beginning private investigation into case number 7A113. Michael Hale. Probability of internal tampering. High. Lead suspect, Lieutenant Cole Maddox. Continuing discreetly. She saved the file. Then she closed her eyes. Had her father, Admiral Drake, been right all along? Sometimes the hardest battles, he used to say, are fought inside your own walls. Outside, thunder rumbled. The storm was returning. But so was her resolve. The rain had returned by late afternoon, gentle at first, then steady, then angry, as if it had unfinished business on the base. Most people hurried between buildings, collars up, heads down. But one figure walked with purpose, unmoved by the weather. Daisy Drake. Her ponytail was damp from the mist, her uniform jacket pulled tight, but her steps never faltered as she crossed the lot toward the giant motor pool warehouse. She hadn't slept much. Every discovery from last night's investigation replayed itself again and again. The altered logs, the false signatures, the inconsistencies, that pointed unmistakably toward Cole Maddox. But there was one thing she couldn't push out of her mind: the way Michael Hale looked in the rain. Quiet. Strong. Steady. A good man pressed into the shadows by someone else's ambition. She couldn't let him fight alone. She reached the warehouse door and exhaled the breath she'd been holding since she left her quarters. Her hand hesitated on the handle, not out of fear, but out of something she rarely felt. Nervousness. Because this wasn't just official business anymore. She pushed the door open. Inside the warehouse was dim, the overhead lights casting long reflections across the concrete floor. The echo of tools clinking carried through the space, and there at his workbench stood Michael Sleeves, rolled up, a wrench in one hand, and grease marking the edge of his thumb. He looked tired, a different kind of tired than yesterday, the kind that settled in the soul. When the door thumped shut behind her, Michael looked up. He froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain drummed softly on the roof above the world, outside, fading until it felt like only the two of them existed in the quiet, cavernous space. "Daisy," he finally said, his voice low, uncertain. "What are you doing here?" She took a step toward him, then another, her boots echoing on the concrete. "I needed to talk to you." Michael set the wrench down slowly, as if bracing himself. "Is this about the case?" Daisy swallowed. "Yes. And no." Michael's brow tightened. "If you're here to tell me they found more evidence." "No," she cut in quickly. Then softer. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Michael." Her voice carried an honesty he couldn't mistake. He let out a shaky breath. "Then why are you here?" The answer wasn't simple, but she gave him the truth. "Because I saw something last night," she said. "In you. In your daughter. And because the man I met in the rain doesn't match the man in the file I was assigned this morning." Michael stared at her, searching her expression for deception. Finding none. "What did they assign you?" he asked quietly. Daisy stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion around his eyes, the weight of months bearing down on him. "The investigation," she said. "Your file. Your case." Michael didn't breathe for a solid 3 seconds. Then he stepped back, as if trying to protect himself from the words. "So that's what this is," he said with a bitter exhale. "You came to tell me what they're planning next." "No," she shook her head firmly. "I came to tell you that something is wrong." Michael's eyes narrowed. Wrong, how Daisy reached into her jacket and pulled out a small folder printouts of the discrepancies she had found. She laid them gently on the corner of his workbench. "You're being framed," she said quietly, "and I'm going to prove it." He didn't move, didn't reach for the folder, didn't speak. The storm outside filled the pause wind, pressing against the metal siding like a restless thing. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Daisy's throat tightened. "Maybe I don't know everything about you, but I know who you showed me in the storm, and I know what I found in your file. And they don't match." He stared at her, not like a man who didn't believe her, but like a man afraid to. "People don't usually stand up for me," Michael said. "Not anymore." Daisy took another small step. "Well, I'm not most people." Something cracked in him, then not broken, but opening. A door he hadn't dared unlock in months. Before he could respond, small footsteps echoed from behind a stack of tires. Daddy Kara's voice. She had apparently finished her coloring time in the small break room. She peeked around the corner, hugging her teddy bear, her eyes lighting up when she saw Daisy. "You came back." Daisy knelt instinctively, her smile softening. "I did." Kara ran straight into her arms, wrapping her small hands around Daisy's neck. The warmth of that innocent trust nearly undid Daisy completely. Michael watched something melting in his expression, something gentle, something he'd almost forgotten how to feel. Kara pulled back and looked between the two of them with the perceptiveness of a child who understood more than adults ever assumed. "Are you here because of Daddy's scary papers?" she asked. Daisy's breath caught. Michael's shoulders tensed. She brushed a hand over Kara's hair. "I'm here to help." "Good," Kara said with absolute conviction. "Daddy needs someone who believes him." Daisy swallowed hard. "I do," she whispered. Then standing, she turned to Michael. "I'm not letting this go." Michael held her gaze. There was fear in his eyes. Hope, too. Something long buried, flickering back to life. Finally, he nodded. A small, fragile act of trust. Then, "Thank you," he said softly. Daisy felt her chest tighten. She opened her mouth to say more, something reassuring, something gentle. But a sudden gust of wind slammed against the warehouse doors, rattling them violently. Michael glanced toward the noise, unease shadowing his features. "Storm's getting worse," Daisy nodded. "Yeah," she said quietly. "But some storms need to break before the sky clears." Michael didn't know what she meant. Not yet. But very soon he would. That night, the base looked different to Daisy Drake. Maybe it was the storm cloud still crawling across the sky. Maybe it was the heaviness of what she carried. Or maybe it was the new awareness that danger wasn't somewhere out there. It was inside these walls, wearing the same uniform she trusted her whole life. She pulled her hood over her head and walked briskly across the courtyard, glancing behind her without turning her full head. It was subtle, just a quick flick of the eyes. But it confirmed what she already sensed. Someone was following her. She didn't break stride. In the military, predators didn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they walked in plain sight, only their intentions lived in the dark. And she knew exactly who had a reason to watch her now. Cole Maddox. Her pulse quickened, but she kept walking until she reached her quarters. She stepped inside, locked the door, and let her back slide down the wall until she was sitting on the floor. She exhaled shakily. For years, Daisy prided herself on being hard to rattle. Growing up as the daughter of Admiral Drake meant learning early how to stand in storms without blinking. But tonight, something felt different. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid of what she was about to unleash. She wiped her palms against her thighs and forced herself to stand. She had one priority right now: protect the proof that Michael Hale was innocent. And that meant sending the evidence to the one person with authority to shield her before Cole made his next move. Her father, Admiral Jonathan Drake. She opened her secure device and uploaded every document she'd found: altered logs, mismatched signatures, surveillance inconsistencies, everything pointing to Cole Maddox. She attached a simple message: urgent. Need private review. Trust no intermediaries. She hit send. Then she powered down the tablet and sat at the small dining table staring at her shaking hands. She hated that they trembled. Hated that Cole Maddox had pushed her to this edge. But sending the evidence brought something else with it. Relief. Because now, no matter what happened to her, the truth wouldn't disappear. Meanwhile, in a small, warm living room across town, Michael Hale was having a very different evening. Kara sat cross-legged on the rug, surrounded by colored pencils, drawing pictures of red umbrellas and two grown-ups standing under them. Occasionally, she glanced up at her father with that curious innocence only a 7-year-old could manage. "Daddy?" she asked. "Yes, Bug, is the soldier lady your friend?" Now Michael looked up from mending one of Kara's stuffed animals, its arm torn from too much hugging. "I don't know," he said honestly. "We talked a little." Kara tilted her head. "But she believes you. That means friend." He smiled to himself, shaking his head at the simplicity of her logic. If only the world worked that way. He finished stitching the teddy bear and handed it back to Kara, who hugged it tightly. But Michael's thoughts drifted not toward fear for his job or anger at the situation, but toward Daisy. The way she stood in the rain, the way she looked at him with seriousness, yes, but also with something gentler. The moment she promised she wouldn't let him fall. He didn't know why those words hit so deep. Maybe because no one had promised him anything in years. He leaned back on the couch and stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft pattering of rain. Some part of him long buried beneath worry and exhaustion sparked back to life. Hope back on base. Daisy was about to take off her boots when a soft vibration buzzed against her leg. She frowned, pulling her phone from her pocket. A message from an unknown number. "You're looking in the wrong places." Her blood chilled. A second message arrived instantly. "Stop digging, Drake." No threats, no name, just the unmistakable signature of intimidation. Cole Maddox was losing patience. Slowly, she went to the window and pulled the curtain aside just half an inch. Rain blurred the outside world, but between shadows, she saw movement near the walkway. Someone standing under the awning, too still to be casual. Watching. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. She stepped away from the window, forcing her breath steady. If Cole wanted her scared, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in months. When the line picked up, she recognized her father's voice instantly. Deep, calm, authoritative. "Daisy, Dad. I sent you something. Something important." A pause, a heavy one filled with all the unspoken tension between them. "I saw the files," Admiral Drake said quietly. "I'll handle it." The weight in Daisy's chest loosened. "Thank you." "You're doing the right thing," he said. "But listen to me carefully, be alert. When corrupt men get desperate, they also get reckless." She closed her eyes, hearing truth in his tone. "I know." "And Daisy?" "Yes. Do not walk anywhere alone." A lump formed in her throat. "Dad, promise me." She swallowed. "I promise." They hung up. Daisy let the silence settle before she slid down onto the edge of her bed, her mind racing. She needed space, clarity, safety. And without meaning to, her thoughts drifted to Michael and Kara, two souls who felt like warmth in a world suddenly turning cold. She whispered into the dim room, "I'll protect you both. No matter what, across town." Kara finally fell asleep on the couch, clutching her patched teddy bear. Michael carried her to her room, tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and turned off the lamp. As he stepped into the hallway, a sudden unease tugged at him like the air had shifted, like something unseen pressed against the edges of his life. He didn't know why. He didn't know that Daisy was being watched. He didn't know that Cole Maddox had realized she was moving against him. He didn't know that forces on base were grinding into motion. But he felt it. Storm clouds gathering. He whispered a quiet prayer, a rare one, for Kara, for strength, for whatever comes next. He didn't know it yet, but fate had begun to close the distance between his world and Daisy's. And soon their storms would collide in ways neither of them expected. The sky the next morning was deceptively calm, pale blue streaked with soft clouds, the kind of morning that made the base look almost peaceful. But Michael Hale felt none of it. Not the breeze, not the sunlight, not the promise of a normal day. He felt something else, a heaviness in the air, a tension he couldn't name. Storm pressure without a storm. He'd felt it once before, years ago, right before a convoy accident changed the course of his career. It was the same now, a silent warning his instincts whispered, but couldn't explain. He arrived at the motor pool and scanned in. Soldiers nodded politely, but their eyes carried uncertainty, conversations dropping to whispers as he passed. Something had shifted. He set his lunch on his workstation, rolling up his sleeves to start the morning round. But before he could pick up a wrench, the heavy bay doors slid open. Not casually, not slowly. with intention. 2 MPs stepped inside, fully uniformed, fully equipped, fully focused on him. The room fell deathly still. Kara's drawing taped to his toolbox fluttered from the sudden draft. A red umbrella sketched in crayon. Michael Hale, the lead MP, said. Michael swallowed. Yes, sir. You're to come with us. A cold weight dropped into his stomach. On what grounds? The MP didn't blink. New testimony from a senior officer. Additional evidence presented this morning. Michael's mind raced. New evidence. New testimony. He didn't need to guess who the officer was. Cole Maddox. The MPs stepped closer. Michael forced his breathing steady. He looked around the room at the young mechanics, the supervisors, the officers. People he had worked beside for years stood frozen, unsure whether to defend him or judge him. Then he saw it. Pity. That stung worst of all. The MP gestured. Sir. Hands forward. Michael set down his wrench and extended his hands. Cold steel cuffed his wrists tight, but not cruel. Behind him, a few gasps rose. A dropped coffee mug shattered on the floor. Michael closed his eyes for half a second, not in fear, but in heartbreak. What will Kara think? He opened them again with quiet resolve. I'll comply, he said. They led him out. Every footstep echoed like a sentence. On the other side of base, Daisy Drake's boots slapped against the concrete as she rushed through the administrative wing, her hair still damp from a rushed shower, her tablet clutched tightly in her hand. She'd barely slept. Her father's voice had replayed in her mind all night. Be alert. Don't walk alone. Cole is dangerous. She reached her office, scanning in quickly. As soon as the lock clicked behind her, she pulled up her father's reply to the evidence she'd sent. His message was brief. Too brief. I'm reviewing this myself. Do not trust chain of command. Stay silent for now. Silent. She couldn't be silent. Not when Michael's case was accelerating. She opened the digital logs, refreshing the case file, and froze. Their time stamped just an hour earlier. New testimony submitted by Lieutenant Cole Maddox. Urgent update. Immediate detainment recommended. Her blood ran cold. No, she whispered. She grabbed her jacket and sprinted out the door. The detainment hallway. Michael sat alone in the small holding room, a sterile space with a metal bench, pale walls, and buzzing lights that never dimmed. He stared at his hands, the cuffs still cutting shallow marks into his skin. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shocked. He was tired. But the image of Kara's face, bright and trusting, stabbed like a blade. A guard stood at the door. Hale. You have someone coming to speak with you. Michael lifted his head. The guard didn't say who. Daisy arrives. Daisy practically threw herself out of her vehicle, ignoring the rain and the startled looks from passing soldiers. She ran through the administrative entrance, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. 2 MPs moved to block her. Ma'am, this area is restricted unless I said, move! Daisy snapped, flashing her ID. The authority in her voice, sharp, commanding, unmistakably. Drake made them step back instantly. She pushed through the door into the holding corridor, and the moment she saw Michael through the small window in the door, her breath shattered. He sat with his shoulders low, expression calm, hands cuffed. But she saw the storm inside him. She opened the door. Michael looked up, stunned. Daisy. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. What happened? She demanded. Michael let out a hollow laugh. You tell me. Anger surged in her chest, not at him, but for him. They said there was new evidence, he added. Testimony. You know who it came from. Daisy clenched her fist so tight her nails dug into her palm. Cole. Michael nodded once, a tired, resigned gesture. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. I swear to you I didn't know they were going to do this. I'm working on it. I'm sending everything to my father. Her voice broke slightly. Michael watched her with something soft and painful in his eyes. Why are you fighting so hard for me, Daisy? She swallowed. Because you deserve someone in your corner. Because your daughter looked at me like I mattered. Because you helped me in the rain when no one else would. Because something about you makes me want to stand still and breathe for the first time in years. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she said the truth she could manage. Because you're innocent. His eyes flickered. And if that doesn't matter to them, it matters to me. He inhaled shakily, looking at her, as if grounding himself in her presence. Before she could say more, the door behind them slid open. Footsteps, deliberate, powerful, commanding. They turned. Standing there in full uniform, 4 gold stars gleaming on his collar, Admiral Jonathan Drake. Daisy straightened instantly. And the Admiral scanned the room, his gaze landing on Michael. His expression gave nothing away. "Lieutenant," he said to Daisy, "step aside." She hesitated. "Now." She obeyed. Admiral Drake turned to the MPs. "Bring me the full unedited file. The real one. Not the version circulating this morning." Cold silence filled the hall. One MP stammered, "Yes, sir." The Admiral's eyes returned to Michael Sharp, evaluating, almost protective. "Mr. Hale," he said quietly, "I'm here to get to the bottom of this." And for the first time since the investigation began, Michael felt something shift. The storm wasn't over. But suddenly, he wasn't facing it alone. Rain hammered the windows of the admin tower like a warning drum, steady and relentless. Daisy Drake sprinted across the corridor, her boots splashing through puddles forming on the polished floor where soldiers had tracked in the storm. Her breath came sharp, adrenaline burning in her veins. She had 24 hours. 24 hours to unravel a conspiracy that had been months in the making. 24 hours to save Michael Hale before Cole Maddox buried him completely. She pushed into the restricted archive wing and scanned her ID. The door unlocked with a heavy clunk, then slid open, revealing rows upon rows of metal shelves stretching into the dimness. A chill ran through the room, cold air, cold secrets, cold intentions. The lights flickered as she stepped inside. She swallowed hard. This is it. The original logs, the untouched records, the files Cole hadn't manipulated yet. And someone else knew she would come. Ticking clock. She checked her watch. 23 hours, 52 minutes left. Admiral Drake had given his daughter barely a day, because he knew the system, knew the danger, knew how much time she realistically had, before Cole realized she'd escalated the case. Daisy moved quickly, scanning barcodes, pulling drawers open, swiping her card for deeper levels of clearance. She retrieved digital drives, paper files, time-stamped reports, anything that matched the dates of Michael's alleged sabotage. Her hands worked fast, but her mind replayed the image of Michael sitting in that holding room, cuffed, exhausted, trying not to let her see the fear he fought to hide. And Kara, her tiny voice echoing, "Daddy needs someone who believes him." Daisy tightened her grip on a set of original maintenance logs. "I'm not failing him. I'm not failing that little girl." She loaded drives into her encrypted satchel and double-checked the shelves. This archive had sensor logs, key logs, footage, everything Cole feared, everything she needed. Meanwhile, in the holding room, Michael sat alone, the clock ticking loudly above him. It felt like the world was shrinking, walls inching in air, growing thinner. He rubbed the red marks around his wrists where the cuffs had been. He wasn't thinking about himself. He wasn't thinking about the unfairness of it. He was thinking about Kara, her bright face, her drawings, her belief that he could fix anything. And Daisy, storm-soaked, fierce, determined, standing in that doorway, promising she wouldn't let him fall. Something about her presence had cracked him open in ways he hadn't expected. Now, she was his only lifeline. He sent a silent prayer into the still room. Keep her safe. He had no idea how close danger already was. Back in archive. The shadows move. Daisy found the secured cabinet containing terminal activity logs. These were the holy grail records that would show exactly who accessed the motor pool equipment database, and when. She typed in her clearance code. Access granted. She pulled the drawer open and scanned the files, then froze. Something was off. Half the folders were slightly out of sequence. Not misfiled. Handled. Recently. Her pulse picked up. Cole had been here. She scanned the shelves again. Some dust disturbed. Some drawers smudged. Someone had pulled files and put them back. He was checking what she might find. She felt a cold prickle crawl up her spine. She wasn't alone in this hunt. She was chasing Cole Maddox, and he was stalking her right back. The discovery. Her hands shook slightly as she slid out a hard drive from the back of the drawer, the one Cole had missed, probably because it wasn't labeled. She plugged it into her portable terminal. Lines of data filled the screen. Error logs, keycard inconsistencies, login attempts from Cole's ID while he was logged out, tampered timestamps clearly altered by manual intervention. Her heart slammed in her chest. "This is it," she whispered. "This proves everything." A noise echoed behind her. A footstep. She spun. Nothing. Just rows of silent shelves. But Daisy wasn't fooled, not anymore. She slung the satchel across her shoulder and turned off the terminal. She had what she needed. Now she just had to get out alive. The storm breaks. She stepped back into the main aisle and stopped cold. Lieutenant Cole Maddox stood at the far end, still, silent, watching her. Water dripped from his slicked back hair. He didn't look angry. He didn't look surprised. He looked amused, like a predator who had finally cornered his prey. "Busy night, Drake?" he asked casually, his voice echoing through the metal shelves. Daisy's muscles locked. Her heart slammed painfully against her ribs. "Step aside," she said evenly. Cole smirked. "You know, most officers don't dig this deep. They trust their colleagues. They follow protocol. They stay alive that way." "Are you threatening me?" she demanded. Threatening Cole laughed softly. "No, just stating facts." He took a step closer. Daisy reached into her jacket, her fingers brushing the small, concealed baton she carried. Cole noticed and smiled wider. "Careful," he murmured. "Wouldn't want a misunderstanding." "You know how fast careers end around here." Her breathing quickened, not in panic, but in cold, calculated anger. "You framed an innocent man," she said. "You tampered with federal evidence. You lied to the chain of command." Cole shrugged. It's amazing what people will believe when it's written down neatly. And when the person behind it wears a uniform, Daisy snapped. His jaw twitched, just slightly. She hit a nerve. He stepped closer. She stepped back. Her hand clutched the satchel strap. "You're not walking out with those files," Cole said quietly. Daisy swallowed. "Watch me." She pivoted sharply and sprinted toward the exit. Cole lunged. She bolted down the aisle, adrenaline exploding through her body. Shelves blurred around her. Papers rustled in her wake. Daisy Cole roared. She didn't stop. She slammed her ID against the scanner. The door hissed open. She burst through and nearly collided with 2 military police officers outside. They stared in surprise. Behind her, Cole skidded to a halt, face twisting with barely contained fury. "Lieutenant Drake, 1 MP, said. Blinking. "Why are you secure this wing?" Daisy ordered, voice sharp as steel. "Now!" They snapped to attention instantly. Cole stood frozen behind the threshold, unable to cross without triggering the lock sensor. For the first time, Daisy saw something in his eyes. Fear. Not for himself, but for the evidence she carried. She tightened her grip on the satchel and whispered just loud enough for him to hear. "It's over, Cole." But as she walked away, the storm outside cracked open with thunder, and deep in her gut, she knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Not until the truth reached the only man who could end this. The interrogation wing was colder than Michael expected. Not physically, though the vents did blast recycled air through the narrow hallway, but in atmosphere. Quiet, heavy, suffocating, as if the walls themselves judged the people inside. Michael sat at the metal table, wrists raw from earlier cuffs, hands folded in front of him. He kept steady, but the muscles along his jaw tightened every time he thought of Kara. Where was she now? Was she scared? Did she ask why Daddy wasn't home yet? His chest ached. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Not hurried, not uncertain, measured, controlled. Command steps. Then the door opened. Admiral Jonathan Drake entered the room. Everything about him commanded silence. His white uniform immaculate, his posture unyielding, his expression carved from stone. But his eyes, sharp assessing, locked onto Michael with an intensity that made the air shift. He didn't sit immediately. He studied Michael first. Not like an officer reviewing a suspect, but like a man weighing truth. Finally, he lowered himself into the chair opposite Michael. "Mr. Hale," he said, voice calm but carrying the authority of decades. "I've reviewed the case file." Michael nodded once. "Then you know the allegations are false." "I know the file I received this morning is questionable," the Admiral replied. "But the truth is rarely found in paperwork alone." Michael met his eyes. "Then look at me and decide." A long, tense silence filled the room. Admiral Drake leaned back. "My daughter has taken an unusual interest in your situation." Michael stiffened slightly. This was dangerous ground. "I didn't ask her to," he said. "I wouldn't, I know," the Admiral interrupted gently. "Daisy does not involve herself lightly. If she believes something is wrong here, I listen." Michael exhaled slowly. Not relief, not yet. But the first hint of oxygen in hours. Before the Admiral could speak again, the door burst open without warning. Daisy, her hair slightly disheveled from the rain uniform damp satchel slung across her shoulder. Her breath came quick. She'd clearly run here. Admiral Drake stood immediately. "Daisy." "I have the evidence," she said, stepping forward. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from urgency. "You need to see it. All of it." She placed the satchel on the table and pulled out the original logs, the drives, the timestamps Cole hadn't managed to erase. Michael watched her, something breaking open inside him. Daisy didn't look at him yet. She couldn't. Her focus was razor sharp on the task. "I intercepted Maddox in the archive wing," she said. "He tried to stop me." "That alone should tell you something." The Admiral's tone hardened. "Is he aware you have these?" "Oh, yes," Daisy said, jaw tight. "He knows." Admiral Drake turned to the MPs standing guard outside. "Bring Lieutenant Cole Maddox. Now." The guards exchanged uneasy glances, but obeyed instantly. Daisy finally met Michael's eyes. Something passed between them. Relief, apology, hope, fear, all tangled together. He could tell she'd risked far more than she wanted him to know. And she could see in his expression how much he'd endured alone. Moments later, truth collides. The door slammed open again. Cole Maddox entered, flanked by 2 MPs, his uniform immaculate, but his face strained with irritation and underlying fear. "Admiral," he began. "I wasn't informed." "That was intentional." The Admiral cut him off coldly. Cole's jaw clenched. Daisy stepped forward. "Explain why your login appears on equipment logs at times you were off base." Cole scoffed. "Fabricated. Probably by Hale here." and why Daisy pressed your digital signature matches a forged entry on the equipment tampering report. Coincidence, Cole snapped. Drake, you're overstepping. Admiral Drake slammed a folder onto the table with a sharp crack. The room went dead silent. Lieutenant Maddox, the Admiral, said, his voice. ICE explain why your ID was used to override maintenance logs at 3:42 a.m. When this footage, he held up a tablet, displaying security video, shows you entering your apartment across town. Cole swallowed hard. There must be an error. Enough, Admiral Drake commanded. Cole's mouth snapped shut. Daisy crossed her arms, fury flickering in her eyes. You framed an innocent man. Cole's composure cracked. He was a liability. He questioned procedures, challenged reports. People like him don't conform. They create problems. I was protecting the unit, Michael stared. A cold calm settled over him. So you destroyed my life for convenience, Cole sneered. A man like you should know your place. Before Michael could respond, Admiral Drake stepped forward. Lieutenant Maddox, you are hereby placed under arrest for evidence, tampering, falsifying federal records, and obstruction of justice. The MPs seized Cole immediately. Wait, Admiral. Listen. Cole protested, but it was too late. His voice was swallowed by the hallway as he was dragged out. Silence returned. A deep, cleansing silence. Freedom. Admiral Drake turned to Michael. Mr. Hale, you're free to go. Michael didn't move for a moment. He needed the words to land to settle into the reality he'd nearly given up hoping for. Daisy stepped closer, her voice soft, breaking through the quiet. It's over, Michael. His eyes locked onto hers. Because of you. No, she whispered. Because you deserved the truth. She reached forward slowly, carefully, and removed the last restraining strap the MPs had left at his wrist. Her fingers brushed his skin. A quiet spark passed between them. Michael stood, and before he even had a chance to speak, small footsteps echoed down the hall. Kara Michael breathed. The little girl burst into sight, escorted by a sympathetic childcare worker. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw her father. Daddy Michael knelt just in time for her to run into his arms, hugging him with all the strength her small body could muster. He held her tight eyes, wet heart breaking open. Daisy watched them, her own throat tightening. Admiral Drake looked away respectfully, folding his hands behind his back. After a long moment, Kara glanced up, spotted Daisy, and smiled through her tears. Daddy. She came back. I told you she would. Michael looked at Daisy. She looked at him. Something unspoken settled between them, something fragile, hopeful, and undeniable. The storm had broken, and sunlight, thin, tentative, was beginning to push through. Morning sunlight spilled gently through the living room windows of Michael Hale's small home, the kind of light that didn't demand attention, but offered comfort. Warm, soft, quiet. It carried none of the sharp edges of the days before. For the first time in months, Michael felt like he could breathe. Kara sat cross-legged on the carpet, humming as she sorted crayons into neat piles. Her curls bounced each time she reached for a new color. She looked lighter, brighter, as if the shadow that clung to her father had been clinging to her too, and finally let go. Michael watched her from the kitchen doorway, an untouched mug of coffee cooling in his hands. His eyes softened. She's safe. She's smiling. She's free. And so was he. But as much relief as he felt, something else lingered at the edges of his thoughts. Someone else. A soft knock at the front door pulled him from his thoughts. Cora perked up. Daddy. Someone's here. Michael set down his mug and approached the door cautiously. Ever since his release, people from base had been dropping by, some with apologies, some with awkward half smiles, some not sure what to say at all. But when he opened the door, he froze. It wasn't a soldier from base. It wasn't an officer with a clipboard. It was her. Daisy Drake. And she wasn't in uniform today. She stood on his porch in simple jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair tied back, her posture relaxed in a way he hadn't seen before. Somehow, without the uniform, she looked both younger and more human, more herself. "Hey," she said quietly. Michael exhaled without meaning to. "Daisy." Kara squealed. "You came back, again." Before either adult could react, the little girl launched herself into Daisy's arms. Daisy laughed, a real heartfelt laugh, and lifted her off the ground. "I could never say no to you," Daisy said, brushing a loose curl from Kara's cheek. Something warm spread through Michael's chest at the sight. Something gentle. Something he didn't dare name yet. "Come in," he said softly. Daisy stepped inside, glancing around with a kind of shy curiosity. "You're home. It feels peaceful. Cozy." Michael chuckled. "That's mostly Kara's doing. I believe that." Daisy smiled. Kara tugged her by the hand. "Sit with me. I'm drawing sunshine." Daisy let the little girl pull her toward the living room, settling onto the floor beside her. Michael leaned on the doorway, watching them with a quiet tenderness he didn't try to hide. For the first time since they met, Daisy looked unguarded. Safe. Like the storm wasn't chasing her anymore. Kara scribbled furiously with a yellow crayon, then nudged Daisy. "You have to draw too." Daisy blinked. "Me?" "Yes." Daddy said, "Drawing helps your heart calm down." Michael's eyes widened slightly. "I said." That Kara nodded. "Last week, when I was sad." Daisy looked between the two of them, Kara's innocence, Michael's embarrassed expression, and something in her eyes softened so deeply it nearly broke him. "Well," Daisy murmured, taking a crayon, "then I guess I'll draw too." For a few minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft scratch of crayons. Michael watched, feeling his heart slowly knit itself back together. Daisy didn't just sit there. She belonged there. When Kara trotted off to her bedroom to retrieve another stuffed animal, Michael finally spoke. "You look different today," he said. Daisy smiled faintly. "No uniform. That's part of it. But it's something else." Daisy let out a breath, half laugh, half confession. "I feel different." He stepped closer. "Because the investigation is over." Her eyes lifted to his steady, honest. "Because the fear is over." Fear. He hadn't expected that word. He lowered himself onto the couch, hands clasped. "Daisy, you risked your career. I know. You put yourself in real danger." "Yes." Cole could have, I know, she repeated gently but firmly. "Michael, I've worn this uniform my whole life. I know what we're taught to see, and I know what we're taught to ignore. But when I met you, something in me refused to ignore the truth." He stared at her. "Not the soldier, not the Admiral's daughter. The woman." "You didn't owe me anything," he whispered. Daisy shook her head. "I owed you justice." A heavy silence fell between them. Not uncomfortable, not cold. Something electric. Something warm. When Kara returned, she climbed between them, holding up a new drawing, 3 figures under a bright yellow sun. "That's me," she said proudly. "And Daddy and you, Daisy," blinked hard. "You drew me. With you both, Kara nodded. "Daddy likes you. I like you. We can be a family, right?" Michael's breath caught. Daisy froze. Kara's innocence filled the room like sunlight. "Kara," Michael whispered, his voice cracking. Daisy brushed a hand down Kara's hair. "Families come in many forms," she said gently, "and they grow slowly, like flowers." "But flowers need sunlight," Kara insisted. Daisy met Michael's eyes over Kara's head. "We have sunlight now," she said softly. Michael swallowed hard. "Yeah," he murmured. "We do." and for the first time the idea of healing, real healing, no longer felt like a distant dream. It felt possible. It felt close. It felt like Daisy. 1 year later, fall sunlight drifted across the naval station like a warm curtain, soft, golden, and gentle in the way only October light could be. The trees along the main walk were turning shades of amber, and red leaves fluttering down like tiny blessings on the wind. Kara Hale skipped ahead on the sidewalk, her little red umbrella twirling playfully above her, even though the sky was perfectly clear. She wasn't shielding herself from rain today. The umbrella had become a symbol, a memory, a beginning. Daisy Drake walked beside Michael, her shoulder brushing his, every so often a small thing, but one that felt natural, earned, and steady. She wore civilian clothes again today. Jeans, a navy blouse, hair tied loosely. Ever since she transitioned into her new role as a military training instructor, she rarely wore the formal uniform outside class hours. Michael still glanced at her sometimes with quiet awe. A year ago, he'd only seen her as a silhouette in the storm, a lost soldier fighting a flat tire. Now she was something he never imagined he would have again. A partner, a confidant, a reason to believe in tomorrow. Kara hopped onto a bench, stretched her arms out like wings, and shouted, "Daddy Daisy." "Look, I can fly." She jumped down before either adult had time to warn her, and landed safely, beaming. Michael laughed. "Careful, superstar." "It's okay, Daisy always catches me," Kara declared proudly. Daisy smiled softly. "Well, someone has to keep you out of trouble." Michael glanced at her sideways. "And someone has to keep me out of trouble." That, Daisy said with mock seriousness, is a full-time job. They shared a smile that carried 12 months of healing, quiet dinners, rebuilt, trust, slow conversations under warm lights, long walks, shared responsibilities, gentle steps into love. It hadn't been dramatic. It hadn't been rushed. It had been real. A new life. They reached the recently renovated maintenance hangar, where Michael now worked, not as a janitor, not as a suspect, not as a shadow of his former self, but as a lead technical specialist. Morning Hale, a mechanic, called out, "Got that new diagnostic update ready for you." "Be there in a few," Michael replied, raising a hand. The base used to look at him with suspicion. Now they looked at him with respect. Not because Admiral Drake intervened, though that helped. Not because he'd been cleared, though that mattered, but because the truth had come out, and Michael Hale had stood firm through it all. He turned to Kara. "You ready to see the new truck bug?" Kara nodded eagerly. "Can Daisy come too?" Daisy opened her mouth to answer, but Michael caught the hesitation in her eyes and stepped closer. Not too close, just enough for her to feel him there. "You don't have to rush anywhere," he said gently. "Stay." Daisy's eyes softened. "I want to." Kara cheered and ran ahead. Michael and Daisy followed slowly. You ever think Michael asked quietly about how different life was? Before that storm, Daisy clasped her hands behind her back. I think about it every day. What do you think would have happened if Kara hadn't held out that umbrella? If we hadn't stopped for you, Daisy let out a soft laugh. Well, technically I stopped for my flat tire. You two just happened to show up and save me from it. Michael's voice lowered. We saved each other. Daisy's breath hitched not dramatically but gently in the way someone reacts when truth touches a tender place. She looked at him fully now. You were living through a storm long before the rain came, she said softly. You just hid it well. And you? Michael asked. What storm were you carrying? Daisy looked ahead at Kara, now spinning with her red umbrella in the golden sunlight. The kind Daisy whispered that makes you forget who you are, until someone reminds you. Michael didn't take her hand. He didn't need to. Their closeness was already an unspoken promise, A symbol returns. As they approached the main gate of the hangar, Admiral Jonathan Drake stood waiting, hands behind his back, posture strong as ever. But his expression held none of the sternness from a year ago. He nodded respectfully. "Michael? Daisy?" "Kara." Kara sprinted forward and hugged him around the waist. Admiral Grandpa Daisy pressed a hand to her forehead. "Kara, sweetheart, you can't call a 4-star admiral." "It's fine," Admiral Drake said, his voice warming. "She earned the right." Michael chuckled. Daisy groaned. The Admiral cleared his throat, turning to Michael. "I received the final reinstatement certification this morning," he said. "Your record is clean. Fully and permanently." Michael nodded slowly. A quiet, powerful moment. "Thank you, sir. You earned this," Admiral Drake replied. "Not because of Daisy, not because of me, but because the truth eventually bends toward good men." Michael's throat tightened slightly. Then the Admiral looked at Daisy. "Proud of you," he said softly. Daisy blinked. "You are taking down a corrupt officer without hesitation. You remind me of your mother." Daisy bit her lip, swallowing the emotion rising in her chest. Kara, unaware of the weight in the air, tugged Michael's sleeve. "Daddy, can we show Daisy the sunshine drawing I made for her?" "Of course." She took Daisy's hand and pulled her away, skipping. Admiral Drake stepped beside Michael. "You know the Admiral said, watching his daughter, and Michael's daughter walking hand in hand, some storms destroy, others reveal." Michael followed his gaze. "Is that what you think happened here?" The Admiral nodded once. "That storm brought you into my daughter's life, and hers into yours. I'd say that's something worth being grateful for." Michael's voice grew quiet. "I am." The Admiral gave a rare, gentle smile. "Good, because I believe Daisy has finally found a place where she feels safe. Don't let her lose it." Michael nodded. "I won't." Where kindness leads. Later, as the day softened into late afternoon, the three of them walked home. Michael on one side, Daisy on the other, Kara dancing ahead. Leaves crunched beneath their feet. The air smelled like pine and sun-warmed pavement. At a quiet crosswalk, Michael reached out, took Daisy's hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. Kara spun around them, umbrella twirling. "You look like a family," she shouted. Daisy laughed, leaning into Michael. "We're getting there," he whispered. Daisy rested her head against his shoulder. "The storm that night brought you to us," Michael said softly. And sometimes, Daisy whispered, the kindness of a stranger is really the miracle that changes everything. Michael squeezed her hand. "Let's walk together," he murmured. "Wherever kindness leads." And with the red umbrella catching the late afternoon sun ahead of them, they followed it toward warmth, toward healing, toward a future shaped not by fear, but by love, born in the rain. Before we close today's story, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Our community is made up of wonderful people from many places, and your comments truly bring this channel to life. If stories about kindness, family resilience, and quiet heroes touch your heart, we warmly invite you to join our channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful stories that comfort, inspire, and stay with you long after the video ends. And from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for spending your time with us today. Your presence means more than you know. We look forward to sharing many more journeys with you.